Well, welcome once again to another edition of the Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. Of course, that's me, your host. You'll actually be able to not only tune into this, listen to this on the air on KPFK, but you will be able to watch the video as well. So I'm letting everybody know that if you're out there in Radioland, you will also be able to watch this interview on video at theexpansionzone.com and also on YouTube. All right. Well, as usual, happy Monday to you. And I've got a couple of Monday quotes really quickly here, which sometimes I do one, but today I'm doing two. And the first one is Mondays are the start of the work week, which offer new beginnings 52 times a year. And the second one is you've got to get up every morning with determination if you're going to go to bed with satisfaction. All right, so talk about that in a little bit. And the first quote is by David Wecker, I believe, and the second one is George Lorimer. And today's topic is actually going to be about how grief, loss, disappointment affect certain organs in the body. Of course, there's more to it than that, but that's sort of one of the focus that I wanted to bring today in light of our world at this time. And our guest today is Chris Shelton, Tai Chi and Qigong master, which we've had on before. Love chatting with him. Anyway, quickly regarding the quote, every day is new is basically my interpretation of this. Every day is new, and thoughts and actions matter as we rise each morning to approach the day with lots of what determination. Yeah, of course, our state of mind really does determine how the day unfolds, and oftentimes it's like how the week unfolds, but our state of mind is basically an important factor in all of this, and it's an important factor as well in when we go to bed, and right before we fall asleep. So basically we must somehow convert each day into a series of opportunities for self-discovery. We must change the way that we approach our lives, in our heads, in our minds, and in our hearts. That's what I take from those two quotes. So our bio here for our guest today, Chris Shelton, has dedicated his life to boosting health, happiness, and healing transformations. Chris' belief in the healing powers of Qigong is rooted in firsthand experience. As a teenager, he suffered from devastating back injury that left him in constant pain and nearly crippled. In a 10-year period, he went from not being able to walk to a martial arts champion to a renowned healer. Chris attributes his full recovery to Qigong, a holistic approach perfect for people who want non invasive, affordable, and empowering healthcare. Chris has worked with Special Olympics teams, professional athletes, and celebrities looking for deeper meaning in their lives. He has been doing private medical Qigong sessions for over 20 years now and has helped thousands of people reclaim their lives. His website is Shelton Qigong.com. And of course, that'll be available on the website as well. All right. So without further ado, Chris, welcome back to the expansion zone.
Yeah, thank you once again for having me. And just going off that quote there that you were talking about, our mindset is so important. This morning, for example, somebody shut the door on the cat litter box, and so I didn't know this until after I got up to get my first cup of hot water and lemon, and I stepped in cat poop. Now, I really could have taken this, let it define my day, right? Right. I could have taken it like, oh, this is going to be a crappy day. No pun
A crappy day. Oh my gosh. Okay. I walked right into that, right?
saying it's such a great segue because it's really, it's really the mindset. Now, seriously, I could have had the mindset of, oh, this day is going to be
Yeah.
horrible, right? But instead, it's luckily I had on what we call as our in-house shoes on, and so luckily I wasn't barefooted. So I looked at the positive of it, and as opposed to saying, all right, this is going to define me and the rest of my day. So that's such a great quote because our mindset, when we go to bed, when we wake up, and if we do have mishaps happen, how do we view that? And by the way that we view it, if we just gently shift our paradigm a little bit, we could change the rest of the day and the rest of the week, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think we're not saying that sometimes it's not challenging. It is, but like everything else, right, Chris, it takes practice. Like everything else, we have to just practice changing, creating new habits. So nobody's saying don't create a habit, but it's what kind of habit are you creating?
Right.
And so now today, I wanted to chat with you because there's so much going on in our world right now, and me personally having recently suffered loss of a very very close loved one, someone who used to change my poopy diapers and and give me my baths and pick me up from kindergarten, and that was really really tough. She was a teenager for obviously in the first part when I was born. And as she went along in her 20s, she was still there for me. So that was a very huge thing for me. But I looked on at after I actually reached out to Chris to find out what are some practices, what are some tools that qigong tools that I can use to help to support me in moving through all of this. And he sent that to me, and then there was some other information that he shared in terms of certain organs in the body. And I thought about where we are today with so much grief and loss and fear. And so that's what I wanted to chat with you about. Chris, can you just sort of bring us into a state of just even understanding now, beginning from that part with the what we're dealing with today and the impact on the various organs in the body, this grief and loss, specifically grief, loss, disappointment.
Yeah. Well, first of all, sorry about your loss. And,
Thank you.
most people don't realize this, but our five major organs of our body, our heart, our lungs, our kidneys, spleen, and our liver are mainly responsible for sustaining life. And these internal organs, they have to work together. What people don't realize as well is that different emotions actually attack different organs and shows up as inflammation and disease. And so when we look at grief and loss and disappointment, we also look at, well, what organ systems is it affecting? Well, first and foremost, it's always going to affect the heart. All the internal organs are important, but the heart is really the emperor or empress of the body. It dictates how much of an emotion is going to be expressed or suppressed. And then guess what? That then, whatever, or depending on what the emotion is depending on what organ is affected. So, for example, and if you think about it logically, it makes sense. If you're angry or hateful or resentful at somebody, what happens? Your heart races, and then it weakens your liver and your gallbladder. If you become fearful or shocked by something, or you're stuck in fear, what happens? Your heart races, and then it weakens your kidneys and your bladder. If you become worried or anxious about something, what happens? Your heart races, and then it weakens your stomach, spleen, and your weight and your pancreas. If you're grieving somebody, lost a loved one, your heart hurts, and then guess what? It weakens your lungs. And we'll see people after they lost a loved one, or a pet has passed away or had to be put to sleep, that all of a sudden develop an unproductive dry cough. They go and see their physician, and chances are the physician will say, well, you've developed asthma, here's an inhaler. The reality is that unproductive dry cough is the grief that's stuck in the lungs. So what can we do about it? Is there a remedy besides medication and pharmaceuticals? Yes, there is. And Qigong is an ancient practice. It's thousands of years old. It's based on the premise that we are all emotional beings and we all are operated by energy or chi. If you think about it logically, your heart to be able to function has energy that allows for it to beat, your stomach to be able to digest, your kidneys, the ability to be able to secrete and excrete. It all takes energy. So we're not talking about like we're plugging ourselves into a wall socket, but there's this life force energy that emanates through all living things. There's a sense of consciousness. Even this couch for which I'm sitting on has a level of consciousness. If it did not, all of its molecules would disperse into nothingness. And so understanding how these internal organs function, you start to see how the disease process happens. And right now, with what has been going on over the past year, there's a lot of disappointment and there's a lot of grief and sorrow because people have isolated. Where we are also creatures of community. To be isolated is not natural. There's also the fear component that happens as well too. So when we are frozen in fear, guess what? Our kidneys and our lungs need to communicate together. They work in conjunction with the regulation of body fluids. And as one of the things, the other thing it does too is the lungs actually possess the healing properties in our bodies to be able to fight off pathogens. So our immune health is related back to the strength of those kidneys and those lungs working together. Yes, your pancreas and spleen also plays a role in your immune function as well too. We can get into that later. But if we're just talking about the fear and the shock from what people have been seeing and witnessing, especially people, I know people that spend hours on the news, watching the news or on social media, and what they're seeing out there is shocking. And guess what? This will affect your health. This will create inflammation in the body, and this also will weaken your body's ability to ward off external pathogens.
Mm. Oh, wow. Yes, absolutely. And that to me is it's a necessary conversation. It's a necessary explanation that was presented because we're so used to sort of brushing things off at the topical level. It's like, oh, yes, my heart, I have problems with my heart. Or the problems with their lungs, or it's my kidneys, or whatever, diabetes, but we don't dig in enough to understand the mechanics of the body. And you're right, absolutely. Right now, even if a person hasn't lost a somebody close to them, they are still suffering from this overall loss projection and again and disappointment. So everybody is somehow being affected. And so, yeah, you're right. We need to at this time begin to look at how we're feeling. All these various little things that are going on with us. How are we feeling right now? And so, what would you say, Chris, would be for somebody listening, like the first step to take? We talked about thoughts and emotions, but what are some tools that anybody can just begin, even if it's just in the mind, as you say, to begin?
So one of my favorite practices, and this is in my book, Qigong for Self-Refinement, Total Health with the Five Elements, and it's also on my YouTube channel as well, where we have the 30 days of Qigong, and it's like you're taking 30 weeks with my studio that was in San Jose, California. And each day I talk about the practice and why you're doing it according to Chinese medicine, and each day builds on top of the next. But number one, first and foremost, is not to deny yourself the emotional expression. Like what you just said, some family members or some family groups and some ethnic groups, we are taught not to express our emotions. Japanese men, for example, uh, do not show their emotions. I have a lot of Japanese friends and clients, but yet they have the highest rate of suicides and the highest rate of heart attacks. So your body can sit there and says to you, okay, buddy, you can pretend like that did not hurt you. You pretend like that's not bothering you, but it becomes an accumulation and eventually something has to break. And we see it all the time. We see people that are physically fit, who are exercising, eating right, and they're still dying of chronic artery disease. So
Hmm.
if they're having that kind of inflammation inside the body, what is the one component that they're not looking at? And that is their emotional state. And true, working out is a great way to process things that are upsetting, and movement is the key to longevity. And so what I tell people is that, yeah, I love working out hard. I love martial arts. I've just taken up Western boxing with my coach, Kenny Wack, and here in Los Angeles. And so I love those hard workouts, but we still have to go in. And the difference between Qigong and conventional therapy, because years ago, before I started practicing Qigong, I went to conventional therapy, and sometimes I go in and it's like we picked off the scab And then I left there and I felt worse than when I first walked in. So the difference with Qigong is that we want you to focus on the trauma, whatever the trauma is, feel it, who's involved and what's involved. And let's say it's a heartache, or let's say you lost a loved one, which, like I said, attacks the heart first and then weakens the lungs. So one of my favorite Qigong practices is called the dry cry, or the ha sound. And what's so cool about it is that you can do it audibly, or you can do it underneath your breath, for example, like if you're in public. And what you'll do is that whatever that heartache or that loss is, you're going to feel it, who's involved, what's involved, what are certain circumstances, were there any smells, sounds, what was the environment like, feel it. And as I inhale, I'm going to imagine the pink cloud filling up into my chest. And then as I exhale, I'm going to imagine that as I make the sound, leaving like a dark cloud going several feet away from the body and deep into the ground. Now, most of us have been sad and they've gotten what we call in Chinese medicine is a plum seed effect in our throat, that stuck feeling. And I think the reason why we get that stuck feeling is because of where our structure is. So the chi gets stuck. So if you have that plum seed effect in your throat, then what I recommend to clients of mine is to lift the chin. And as they make the ha sound, imagine the circumstance leaving like a dark cloud from the throat. Now you're going to do this over and over and over again, 10 or 15 minutes. If you're in public, like I said, and something starts to well up for you, instead of you pushing it down the way that we're taught as children, starting, I know like in my family, for example, if you started to cry, my parents would say, shut up. And what happens? You start to learn as a young kid, you,
Right.
and you start to swallow it, right? You start to learn, oh shoot, I have to swallow it. And so no, instead of you suppressing it, if this is a pattern of yours, what I want you to do is, even if you're in public, because no one's going to know what you're doing, you're going to make the ha sound underneath your breath.
Mm.
And I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I got that feeling in my throat, but everything in my life just seemed to be normal. There was no loss, there was no grief that I could even think of, or at least that I was conscious of. And I just trusted my body. And so I would do that sound anyways, because whatever was trying to release needed to be let out. So the difference with this practice, with these Qigong practices, is that yes, whether it's a present day trauma or a past trauma, I want you to pick off the scab. I want you to feel it. But then by doing this specific Qigong practice, like for example, this dry cry sound for the heart, we then release the vibration, which guess what? Helps the body to heal and helps to reduce the inflammation inside of our body. So that's probably one of the first and one of the biggest practices that I recommend because it's so easy to do and you can take it with you anywhere.
Mm. And of course, I immediately went to work with these two specific tools, all the other tools that I've gotten from you in the class, but these two, and I've got to tell you, I started to feel so much lighter. And every time I would feel any sort of heaviness coming on, yes, I would experience it, but I would also do the practice to allow it to leave, to see it leaving. And it just has been for me a phenomenal thing because I think without knowing that there are these kinds of tools, you're right, people tend to sort of suppress, they hold it together, as they say. You're so strong. It's all of those things that ultimately create problems. And I personally saw it firsthand with this very relative of mine. And in honoring her, I really wanted to address this conversation because this person had lived a life to the best of her ability to be happy, but was just very disappointed and had a tremendous amount of regrets in terms of how her life unfolded, not having children, wanting children, never not getting married. She wanted to, marry, all of those things and spent so much time caring for other people that and holding it all in. And ultimately what happened, thyroid problems, which eventually years later, lung problems, heart problems, lung problems, then ultimately kidney problems. I mean, so everything you're saying, Chris, I have seen with this person. Didn't understand it before, before, but as I've learned now, I see how this becomes a gradual um, difficulty on the body.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. In 2014, so I performed, thanks to the First Lady Maria Shriver, I performed Qigong at the World Games, Special Olympic Games in 2015 for the first time ever. Before that, I had to perform at Long Beach for the US Games. And there's a gentleman, Special Olympic athlete, Brett Lauza, 23 years old at the time, and he was one of the torchbearers who was supposed to carry the torch from Athens, Greece, and into the LA Coliseum for the World Games. Anyways, he got up on stage. He saw the 3,000 people in the audience. He froze. He walked off the stage. The
Mm,
next day, I ran into him and his mom, and he said, "Chris, I'm really worried. I'm supposed to be carrying the torch into different cities, and I'm supposed to get on stage and speak. If I froze once, what will happen if I freeze again?" So I gave him two practices. I gave him the heart healing sound, which I just demonstrated. I also gave him the heart cleansing move. Anyways, fast forward, and what had happened was the torch was coming through Los Gatos, California, and the police and the mayor escorted him in. He got up on stage, gave an amazing speech, and he found me in the audience later, and he said, "Thank you so much for those two practices, because now Brett is speaking in front of over tens of thousands of people without any problems." Right? So this is one of those things, right? And like in his case, for example, freezing. I mean, if you freeze on something, it becomes a psychological, a mental thing that perpetuates itself. What ifs, what ifs, what ifs. But if you had a tool, a tangible tool, or maybe it's a little bit intangible because you're doing a healing sound or you're doing a specific movement, but if you have a tool, then instead of it lying deep into or settling into your tissues, which shows up as diseases and different diseases depending on the emotions and the organs that it's affecting, if you have this tool, then guess what? You then now all of a sudden empower yourself. Those simple little tools I gave Brett, he's now empowered to where he has no problem speaking in front of large audiences. And so this is the whole idea about Qigong. And this is one of my main messages, is that what can we give to the public? What can we give to the world for self-empowerment? Because when we talk about mental health, there's never been enough resources
mhm.
investigating what are the proper methodologies besides medicating. Now, sometimes I grant you, sometimes if somebody's on the edge there, and they're thinking about committing suicide, sometimes you have to medicate to back them off the edge, right? But implementing some of these ancient practices, and it's not a belief structure. You don't have to believe in it for it to work. This stuff has been around for thousands of years. And what I tell people is that if it was fake, it still wouldn't be around today, because things that are not real have a way of destroying themselves. So it's something so simple that you could take with you, but understanding that when we have this kind of loss, when we have anxiety, when we have disappointment, when we have shame and guilt, which also affects our lungs, how that actually will show up. We're seeing people right now, we're seeing patients with these skin conditions, these skin lesions right now, because they are under so much stress and they're repressing it. So your liver says, okay, well, I love to process the toxins, but I'm at my capacity. My cup is full. And yes, you could do a liver cleanse and take, herbs that supplement the liver and stuff like that. But if you're still not dealing with the emotional state, then you're not going to be able to fully remedy the situation. At least after seeing thousands of patients over 20 years, at least this is what I've seen in clinic.
I am so glad that you actually also said that part, because while cleanses are good, I've done them. I have done the master cleanse. I've done all kinds of cleanses, right? All kinds of detoxing. But one of the things that we seem to be so afraid of as human beings is really truly dealing with ourselves, that like the deeper part of ourselves, like really coming to that place. So we tend to want quick fixes. We want to do anything that will give us that temporary relief. And because allopathic medicine doesn't really, they don't really talk about this part at all. They don't really discuss it. Then the rest, and most people tend to just go with the topical aspect. Then we find out we do the cleanses, and then they last for a while. You're okay for a minute, and then we're right back where we started from. Lots of unresolved challenges. And And so yeah, I've known for a long time in my life. So you continue to allow things as they show up. How can I work with them? And qigong, I found, is just one of those really amazing natural tools that we're given to communicate with the body, mind, all the organs, everything. So I love qigong.
Well, I'm glad, yeah, and it's one of those things that as we educate people that we understand the science and the physiology of the internal organs, but when we look at it from a Chinese medicine model, and it's not that it's necessarily Chinese, it's just the deeper understanding, then we start to look at, well, besides the emotions, what else affects these internal organs too that will further exacerbate a situation? Right now, the liver is most prone to disease in the spring months. Most people don't realize that the liver does not like wind. What tends to happen during the spring? Seasonal allergies. Why? Because after we come out of hibernation, when the kidneys are most prone to disease and things start to wake up, flowers start to blossom, animals come out of hibernation, anything that's lying dormant in the liver will then start to push outward. And guess what? If there's wind pushing around the pollen or whatever, because I hear it all the time, oh, I had the test done and I'm allergic to these types of grasses or whatnot. And yeah, but if your liver was filtering properly and your kidneys are filtering properly, you would not get those seasonal allergies. I used to have seasonal allergies years ago before practicing Qigong, and now I don't. And because what has happened is that I've worked on the emotional state that affects the organs, in particular the liver, because growing up in an abusive home, I was an angry child for the longest time, and I had serious health problems as a result of all that pent up anger. And but from doing these simple practices, I was able to transform the disease process and get off all the medications. And then
Mhm.
from there, then I started playing around with diet. But at first, I wasn't really changing my diet. Some people say, "Well, you changed your diet." I said, "No, I didn't change my diet. I wasn't, back then I was a butcher, so I was eating a lot of red meat and stuff like that, and you know, and so, anyways, when we look at how these diseases come up, and if we look at seasons when they're not in season, also the diseases that come up. Oh, what else can we look at? Let's look at the energetic properties of food, because what's in your farmer's market right now is meant for you to eat to prepare you not only for the spring months, but also to prepare your body for then when you get into summer. Because then in the summer months, guess what? Your heart is most prone to disease. In the summer, the heart does not like summer heat. So what kind of fruits do we see? We see watermelon, we see cherries, we see peaches. Why? Because they're energetically cooling. We see asparagus. Um, you know, we'll eat more broccoli, cucumber, and artichokes start coming into season. Why? Because they're energetically cooling and they help to offset the summer heat. And some people think, well, maybe I just need to drink more ice water. And what they don't understand is that ice water is actually damaging to the body. And also, by the way, too, let's look at this too. If you're craving ice water, that's your body's way of knocking on your back door saying, listen to me. There's something going on inside your body that's out of balance. That's why you're craving it. If you have any cravings whatsoever, it's your body's way of knocking on your back door saying, listen to me. Now, we could use Qigong practice to help to remedy the imbalance inside the body. And then also we could use food as medicine, but not based upon some bad diet, but based upon the properties of the food and your constitution. So there's a whole rant. There's what I love about this system is that everything is interconnected. Just like you and I and everybody else watching or listening to the show, we are all interconnected. And one of the things you also said in the opening of the show about our paradigm and how we show up. Yes, your thought process is at a certain vibration, and even if you have yourself locked or isolated inside your house, if you're feeling shame or if you're feeling fear, guess what? That vibrates out and connects to other people that are on that same vibration, and it further perpetuates whatever is going on. So if there's a lot of anger going on out there, and you're sitting at home and you're feeling the same thing, guess what? Your vibration then emanates that outward and further contributes to the collective unconsciousness of the whole. So it comes back to us. What can we do? Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 8 to 8:30 Pacific Standard Time, we have the Chi Club, which is a half-hour class where we have people from all around the world that participate. And my wife and myself, Priest and myself, we teach these Qigong classes. And today, so I teach class on Tuesday and Thursday. And today, the opening of today's class, I started off with Michael Jackson's song, Man in the Mirror, because that was the motto going into this weekend is that when you look outside yourself and there's things that are troubling you, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and see what kind of change that you can make and maybe change in your paradigm in order to help to create the collective change that you want to see in your world.
Very awesome. We needed to take a quick break. We need to. I was going to talk about the Chi Club after the break, but Chris, of course, already mentioned it. But we're going to still talk to him about that because you need to know how to connect with the Chi Club and anything else that that is being offered. So stay tuned, everybody, and we will be right back after this brief break. And we are back. Of course, we're coming to you from KPFK 90.7 FM in Southern California and streaming live at kpfk.org. We are chatting with my guest today, Chris Shelton, who is a Qigong master. And we have been having just an incredibly informative and necessary discussion, conversation, insight, all of that into how we can improve our lives. Everybody can stand to improve. You know, there's always room for change and improvement. And so, Chris, would you tell us how can people sign up for Chi Club? Because I think it's essential. You know, people who are home, even if you're just not home, and the beauty is, even if you're not there live, you can go back later that day and participate.
Right. You have the videos for up to 1 week, and it's really inexpensive. It's like $2 a class. If you break it down, you know, it's like $29 a month. So they can go to the qiclub.com, and it's the Chi Club. And we spell Chi both two ways, either CHI, which is a logical way to spell it, or the pinyin way to spell it is QI, the qiclub.com. And you just register there. And yeah, it's a great way to empower yourself. And so if you join us live, we have people from around the world. We started this at the beginning of the pandemic, and what happened was my friend, Hollywood physique expert Eric the trainer, had what is called as a sleep ninja class he started and for free, and then you'd have these different celebrities on, and then which made the workouts really a lot of fun. So as you're working out with him, then you know you have different celebrities come on and talk about their shows or movies, or you know different artists like from Def Leppard or whatever come on. And then he started having these challenges, like the 7-day challenges. Like one was the golden pillow challenge, so being in bed by 9 o'clock. Well, we had the 7-day cheat challenge, and it got such an overwhelming positive response from people around the world that we continued with it. And I was teaching a couple of days a week before we started the Chi Club, and we kept it for free because we realized that people were really suffering out there, and a lot of people were losing their jobs. And so, you know, we didn't realize the impact that it had on people's lives until the economy started to see that things were opening up again, and people were going back to work, and people started sending us donation checks to Morning Crane, saying how grateful they were, how being a part of the Chi, well, we call it the Chi Club now, but the Chi Challenge helped pull them out of their abyss. And because you know one of the things that's happened over this last year is that there's been an increase in suicide, there's been an increase in alcoholism, spousal abuse, child abuse, and what it did was that I gave them a tangible tool to be able to release whatever it was that they're feeling. And you know, if you can't join the Chi Club, we go to Chris Shelton Qigong. That's my handle for YouTube, Instagram, and everything else. But anyways, if you go to Chris Shelton Qigong, we have the 30 days of Qigong on there. And like I was talking about earlier in the show, we also have the Qigong tips of the week. And also every single Friday, we release a video on some health related topic for free. And like tomorrow's video is on skin lesions and boils. It's so sexy, but it's something we need to talk about. So,
I don't know about you, but I'm excited. It's like, woo, romance.
yeah,
Yeah.
no boils.
Oh my gosh.
So, so if you sign up, if you go to our website, sheltonqigong.com, and sign up for our newsletter, then you'll get links to those videos every week. And we send out a blog every week. We don't spam people with a lot of garbage emails, but our whole purpose is how can we empower ourselves? How can I help empower you to be the best version of yourself? And recognizing that we are emotional beings, and those emotions are there on purpose because when God developed our bodies, it is our barometer to what's going on in our environment, whether externally or internally or both. And so expressing those emotions appropriately, in anger, I'll give you an example about anger. A lot of times anger gets a bad rap. And sure, if anger causes you to develop a drinking problem, if the anger causes you to go home and kick the dog, or road rage, or it's causing diseases like depression, um, um, vertigo, or if it's causing things like amemorrhagia, or if it's causing things like acid reflux, GERD, colitis, or migraines, or eye floaters, then guess what? That anger is no longer serving you. But what that anger is there for is for you to make positive change in the world, to do something creative, and to stand up and fight for the underdog. So these emotions are good. It's just when they are suppressed or not expressed appropriately that it shows up as disease. And guess what? That anger, we talk about grief and loss of the lungs, but guess what? When that anger is suppressed, it turns into sorrow.
Mm, hmm.
So
Yeah. Well, I know that you have to go because you've got clients and you've got a busy schedule, but I just want to say that I appreciate you so much, and I just want to say thank you so much for being here on the show. And of course, we'll hear from you many, many more times as I'll have you on to share. So thank you so much.
yeah, and thank you once again for the opportunity. It's always fun chatting with you. I really had fun the last time I was on your show, and once again, I don't want this to stop. I wish I could tell my client to wait, so, but
No,
yeah.
I understand. I completely understand.
But
So
anyways, thank you so much, and thank you for all the great work and positivity that you're putting out there. It's good stuff.
thank you, Chris. Have a great rest of the day.
Okay, you too.
And yeah, for the audience, all right. So there's a couple things that I actually wanted to share with you based on all that we've talked about, all that Chris has shared so far. So even though he's not able to join us for the next few minutes, because that's all we have is just a few minutes left, I wanted to read this, um, and this was actually, I took it from an article that, what's the title of the article? It's turns out Oprah was right. Repressed anger really can lead to low thyroid. Now, this apparently came out. This was in 2007, and this is about the article, not about Oprah. The article. Let me be clear. I'm just looking at content here. So, this was written by Dr. Mary James, ND, naturopathic doctor. So it says here, this is quoting it. Back in 2007, Oprah Winfrey created a huge controversy when she invited a medical doctor on her talk show to argue that low thyroid in women may be the result of unexpressed emotions. For the many millions of women with hypothyroidism in America, the idea that their disorder could be a byproduct of repressed anger was a true wake up call. But conventional medicine had the opposite reaction, and its backlash was immediate and intense. Mainstream media decried this theory as quackery and called for Oprah to stop peddling bad medicine. Sometimes our behavior as human beings, it's so, I want to say primitive, but sometimes I don't want to insult the the folks from that time. But there's a level of ignorance that we hold as human beings in just not being able to see clearly how everything is so connected. Our emotions are connected. Our this processing system that we have that we call a body, that processes sensations, all these electrochemical impulses that we call our emotions, all our feelings, all processed through the body. So what would it, what would make even traditional medicine or allopathic medicine or people become that ignorant? I can't even think of any word right now that I can say on air, but so ridiculous as to be so upset other than our egos about it. Oh no, I don't have that. I don't have anger. And probably the very reaction and response to the statement reflected all the pent up anger that was in there to begin with. And so the other part of this is same article, the biology of anger. And it says here, let's start by looking at what anger does to the body. At the most basic level, anger is a threat response, the fight, in flight, or flight. The experience of anger is associated in part with the chemistry of stress hormones, cortisol, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, which most of us know as adrenaline. Excuse me. So here we're seeing again the chemistry of the body, the chemical makeup of the body. And as Chris mentioned, we know this, we know that the body reacts to our emotions. We know our heart beats fast when we are scared, when we are upset, even when we're angry. Sometimes we get a knot in our stomach, we get a stomach ache when when we're scared or we're upset or we're uncertain about something, or we get a headache. We see that the body is very much so responding to our emotions. So why is it that we can own up to certain things? We can say, oh yeah, that happens, but then we don't want to examine our own personal lives and all of our emotions that are locked up in us, maybe from childhood, from so many different situations. And I think this is important because we keep moving forward in our lives with this same stored or suppressed data, this suppressed information that ultimately tries to get out. And when it tries to get out or tries to notify us that it's there and it's affecting our bodies, we get a pain, we get just all these different things that happen with the body that signal us to say, look, there is an issue here. And if you don't recognize it soon enough, it's going to become bigger. So, again, for me, this is about getting to the heart of those emotional responses and reactions. And particularly right now, as we deal with getting through this experience that we call a pandemic, but to get through this experience and the loads of fear and fear responses, bad behavior, anger, all of these things, all of these reactions that come from this that serve nothing but to affect the immune system, the very thing that we are worried about getting, we run towards it with our behavior. So for me, I want to point out all of that because the expansion zone, once again, is about expanding the mind, is about supporting my listeners as well as myself in ways to better sustain ourselves, ways to better handle self-care. This is your right, and you are the owner of your body. So it is up to you to determine how you will actually care for yourself. We get assistance from the outside, from not just allopathic medicine, but natural medicine practitioners, We've got practitioners, again, like Shelton. We get that kind of assistance, but we must help ourselves. We must help ourselves. We must become responsible for ourselves, for caring for ourselves, and our mental health relies on our caring for ourselves and living our own life, living a life that we want for ourselves, not just for other people. And I'm bringing that up as well because in in honor of my dear relative that passed, these were some of the things that she dealt with is living life by based on other people's terms and conditions, living a life that was not feeling complete, living a life that maybe she thought about or idealized in her head, but not having the courage to live it outward because it didn't fit other people's expectations of maybe what she thought, of herself. And I think many people operate like that in various ways. It could be a career choice. Well, that career choice was maybe not what your parents wanted, and you didn't want to disappoint them. Or even if you went ahead and lived the choice that you thought you wanted, it wasn't. You're still feeling like you didn't honor your family, or that you're hoping that eventually they approve you and your choices. But ultimately, again, in the end, this body, our bodies belong to us. The occupant of that body, it belongs to us. Therefore, our lives belong to us, to the individual. And we can choose how we want to live it. And we live it in honor of ourselves. And when we can live more in honor of ourselves, our trueness, our authentic self, guess what? We are less triggered to to treat someone else in a way that is hurtful. It changes everything. If we can really be more comfortable with ourselves and our lives and feel more satisfied with ourselves, then that would equate to more of a self love, which means that we are going to treat others truly as we would want to be treated. And it's when we are damaged, as we see when people are damaged, typically many times in their childhood, trauma, lots of things, and we'll go, why did this person behave the way that they did? But if we really went and examined that person's life, that person's past, childhood conditions, we see the results. We see that this person maybe was not able to get past these certain things that happened, or this person was living a double life. They're living a life that to the general public is one way, but then quietly they are supplementing that suppressed self with a different kind of life. So we find that we're shocked, to find out that people are doing certain things or behaving certain ways because a lot of this suppressed emotions. So I'm making a strong emphasis on this, and I'm really hoping that people out there, anybody who's listening, that this may really connect with you in terms of how maybe you felt, maybe your whole life, or how you feel maybe just right now, or how you felt during the lockdown, or how you felt about your profession, or how you felt about disappointing other people in your relationships, your parents, your family, disappointing yourself. It's just an overall call to let go, to release that, to release the pressure. the weight that we've put upon ourselves so that our bodies can literally breathe, so that our bodies can actually truly take in the oxygen that it needs, and and really regulate the circulation, the blood flow that is necessary. This whole system working together to keep the immune system working just right, and the organs in the body working just right. It's a full system, a beautifully designed body system that everywhere everything works together. We must get that instead of the constant fragmenting, which is what we keep hearing in the media and in various sources. It's a lot of fragmenting as to how we can maintain a position of wellness in spirit, mind, and body. So, this is the emphasis I'm making. Fear does nothing more than push us towards the thing that we fear, as opposed to seeing what we can do for ourselves and taking back ownership of ourselves, not giving ownership over to media and other people, but figuring out what you can do for yourself. And remember that the system that has governed everything, yes, has had a history of certain kinds of bad behavior as well. You must take responsibility for your own beautiful life and this beautiful gift of life. This is how we honor it, by taking responsibility for ourselves, loving ourselves when we understand all of these things that we've talked about today. So, I want to thank you once again, Chris Shelton, for being on the show. You'll be back many more times because I love his spirit. I love chatting with him. And to our wonderful audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Those of you who are actually watching on this video, thank you for watching. And those of you in Radio Land, thank you. So remember to visit the YouTube channel where many of these videos are posted. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Got to get those numbers up. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. Visit theexpansionzone.com, our website, for the archive for all the shows and many other things. And thanks to our engineer as well. And if you'd like to know more about me and my work and the free workshops that we do once a month, Reality Wednesday, do visit therealsoniabarrett.com to find out more about my work. And as always, I like to remind you to live life to its fullest and question everything. Until next time, see you then.